Nero Wolfe and the Silver Tongues. It was a Wednesday morning in late October when the case began. One of those autumn days when Manhattan smells almost civilized and the light comes through the windows of the brownstone at 918 West 35th Street with a clarity that makes you believe winter might never arrive. I was at my desk in the office doing what I do most Wednesday mornings, sorting through the previous week's expenses, preparing invoices, and wondering whether Wolfe's insistence on Remisier brandy at $40 a bottle constituted a business expense or personal indulgence. The answer, of course, was both. Everything with Wolfe is both. I heard the click of claws on the hardwood floor before I saw him. Loyal, our brick-red pit bull, padded into the office and sat near my desk, his sharp brown eyes fixed on me with that look of quiet intelligence that had once guided him nearly 200 miles through forests and towns to reach this exact address. The story still gets me. Jonathan Blackwood, the reclusive author murdered in upstate New York, had scratched help on Loyal's collar tag and sent the dog away with a desperate faith that he'd reach Nero Wolfe. Loyal had walked for weeks, half-starved and exhausted, until he collapsed on our stoop. Wolfe solved Blackwood's murder, brought the killer to justice, and Loyal stayed. The 5 Dobermans had accepted him as pack, and now he was as much a part of the brownstone security as the bulletproof windows and Fritz's vigilance at the front door. "You need something?" I asked him. Loyal's tail moved once. Not quite a wag, more of an acknowledgement. "Fritz already gave you breakfast." I saw him. Another tail movement. This time I caught it. He was looking toward the front hall. I got up and walked to the hall, Loyal following. Through the thick bulletproof glass panel beside the door, I could see a man on the stoop. Late 50s, expensive camel hair overcoat, grey Homburg, calfskin gloves. He carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he stood with the posture of someone accustomed to boardrooms and country clubs. The doorbell rang. Fritz Brenner appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He's our chef, majordomo, and first line of defense against the outside world. Swiss, precise, and as particular about who enters the brownstone as he is about the temperature of a béarnaise sauce. He glanced at me, and I nodded. Fritz moved to the door but didn't open it yet. Protocol. Caesar, our alpha Doberman, the largest and most commanding of the pack, emerged from the office and positioned himself in the hallway, just far enough back to be unobtrusive but close enough to respond if needed. 110 pounds of disciplined muscle, Caesar had the kind of presence that made people reconsider their intentions. Behind him I caught sight of Apollo, our scout, lean and restless, watching from the stairs with those sharp eyes that never missed movement. Fritz looked through the glass, then at me again. The gentleman appears prosperous. Prosperous men are sometimes the most desperate, I said. Let's see what he wants. Fritz opened the door, but kept the chain engaged. A thick brass chain that would stop anything short of a battering ram. Yes. The man removed his hat. "Good morning. My name is Randolph Hartwell. I'm here to see Mr. Nero Wolfe. I don't have an appointment, but I believe he'll want to hear what I have to say." His voice was remarkable, deep, cultured, perfectly modulated, the kind of voice that belongs to lawyers who charge $500 an hour, or professors who pack lecture halls. Words came out of his mouth like they'd been rehearsed, each syllable weighted and placed with precision. "What is the nature of your business?" Fritz asked. "It's confidential, but it concerns a murder, and it concerns money, a substantial amount of money." Fritz glanced at me. I stepped forward where Hartwell could see me through the gap. "I'm Archie Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe's assistant. How substantial are we talking?" Hartwell met my eyes. $20,000 for his services, $10,000 today, $10,000 upon completion. I felt my eyebrows climb. 20,000 was serious money, the kind of money that could pay bills for months and keep Wolfe in orchids and imported beer for a year. "Wait here," I said. Fritz closed the door, and I walked back to the office. Wolfe was behind his desk, working through the morning mail with the expression of a man who has just discovered that his accountant has been embezzling in disappointing amounts. He's a seventh of a ton of genius wrapped in yellow silk pajamas and a massive frame that rarely leaves the house. At that moment, he was reading a letter from an orchid supplier in Brazil, and from his expression, the news was not good. "Man at the door," I said. "Name's Randolph Hartwell. Late 50s, expensive clothes, expensive voice. Says he has a case involving murder and $20,000. Wolfe didn't look up. 20,000 what? Dollars. 10 now, 10 later. That got his attention. He set down the letter and fixed me with those brown eyes that see everything and reveal nothing. Murder? That's what he says. Very well. Bring him in. I went back to the hall. Fritz had already unchained the door, and Hartwell stepped inside. Caesar watched him from 10 feet away, head slightly lowered, studying. Not aggressive, but not welcoming either. Loyal had positioned himself near the foot of the stairs, silent and observant. Hartwell noticed both dogs and something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or calculation. They're friendly? He asked. Depends on your definition, I said. Follow me. I led him to the office. Wolfe had put away his mail and was sitting behind his desk like a Buddha who had eaten too well and was considering whether to forgive his disciples. He didn't offer to shake hands. Wolfe never shakes hands, but he gestured toward the red leather chair. Sit down, Mr. Hartwell. Hartwell sat, placing his briefcase beside the chair and his hat on his knee. He took a moment to study the office, the bookshelves, the globe, the safe in the corner, the bulletproof windows that were thick enough to distort the view slightly, but clear enough to see the street. Most clients don't notice the windows. Hartwell noticed. You fortified your home, he said. I've taken reasonable precautions, Wolfe replied. You mentioned murder and money. Explain. Hartwell folded his hands. Mr. Wolfe, I belong to a private society called the Augustan Circle. 7 members, all professionals, all devoted to the art of rhetoric and eloquent discourse. We meet monthly to discuss philosophy, literature, politics, anything that requires careful thought and articulate expression. 3 weeks ago, one of our members, a man named Gilbert Thatcher, came to me privately. He said someone in the circle was gathering information about members and using it for blackmail. He claimed to have proof, but wouldn't tell me who the blackmailer was. He said he wanted to handle it quietly, confront the person himself, and resolve it without scandal. And? Wolfe prompted. And 4 days ago, Gilbert Thatcher was found dead in his apartment. The police are calling it suicide, pills and whiskey. What do you call it? Murder. Hartwell's voice was firm. Gilbert was a Methodist minister. He didn't drink. He hadn't touched alcohol in 30 years. If he was going to kill himself, whiskey would be the last method he'd choose. I was taking notes at my desk, but I looked up. Ministers can fall off the wagon. Not Gilbert. I knew him for 15 years. He was as solid as stone. Hartwell reached into his briefcase and withdrew a sheet of paper. And then yesterday, I received this. He placed it on Wolfe's desk. I got up and looked over Wolfe's shoulder. It was a single sheet of white paper with a typed message. Thatcher knew too much. So do you. Stop asking questions or you'll join him. No signature, no return address. Typed on what looked like a manual typewriter, possibly an Underwood or Royal, judging by the slightly uneven alignment of the letters. When did you receive this? Wolfe asked. Yesterday afternoon. It was slipped under my office door sometime between 2 and 4 o'clock. My secretary was at lunch, and I was in a meeting. No one saw who delivered it. Have you touched it since receiving it? Only to read it and place it in my briefcase. I thought there might be fingerprints. There won't be, I said. Anyone smart enough to type an anonymous threat is smart enough to wear gloves. Wolfe studied the note for a long moment, then set it aside. Mr. Hartwell, you believe Thatcher was murdered because he discovered a blackmailer in your circle. You believe this note was sent by the same person, and you want me to identify them. Yes. Why come to me? The police are equipped to handle blackmail and murder. Because if I go to the police, the scandal will destroy everyone in the circle. These are people of influence and reputation. A politician, a lawyer, a poet, a philanthropist. If it becomes public that one of them is a blackmailer and murderer, the press will crucify all of us, guilty and innocent alike. Hartwell leaned forward, and his voice took on that calculated warmth that probably worked wonders in courtrooms. Mr. Wolfe, I need someone discreet, someone brilliant, someone who can identify the guilty party quietly, so the innocent can be protected. And the money? $20,000. I'll write you a check for $10,000 right now. The other 10 when you've solved the case. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. Who are the members of this Augustan Circle? Besides myself and Gilbert Thatcher, who's dead, there are 5 others. I can provide you with names and addresses. Do so. Hartwell pulled a folded sheet from his briefcase and handed it to me. I read it aloud. Lucinda Ashford, poet and professor of literature. Cyrus Bannister, city councilman. Felix Armitage, syndicated newspaper columnist. Dorothea Llewellyn, socialite and philanthropist. Martin Gale, attorney and legal scholar. 6 people, including you, I said. 7 with Thatcher. One of them is a blackmailer and possibly a killer. That's my belief. Wolfe picked up a pen and tapped it against his desk, a habit that means he's thinking. I'll need to interview each member. Here, in this office. Can you arrange that? I can try. Now, try successfully. And Mr. Hartwell, Wolfe's voice sharpened. If you're lying to me, if you're the blackmailer, and this is an attempt to control my investigation, I will discover it. And when I do, I'll ensure your exposure is as public and humiliating as possible. Hartwell's face went pale. I'm not the blackmailer. Then you have nothing to worry about. Mr. Goodwin will prepare a receipt for $10,000. Leave your contact information with him. When I'm ready to begin interviews, I'll notify you. After Hartwell left, Caesar watching him all the way to the door, I returned to the office and sat at my desk. Think he's telling the truth? About Thatcher's death? Possibly. About his own innocence? That remains to be seen. Wolfe reached for the button on his desk that summons Fritz with beer. Blackmail is a peculiar crime, Archie. It requires patience, intelligence, and a complete absence of conscience. It also requires access to information, to people, to secrets. Whoever is blackmailing the Augustan Circle has been doing it carefully, methodically, probably for months. And Thatcher figured it out. So Hartwell claims, but we have only his word. Thatcher is dead and cannot confirm anything. The beer arrived on Fritz's tray, a bottle of Remmers, brought properly unchilled with a bottle opener beside it. Wolfe opened it, poured, drank, and sighed. We'll proceed carefully, he said. Interview each member. Observe. Listen. Someone will lie, and when they do, we'll know. And if they all lie, then we'll find the lie that matters most. By Thursday morning, Hartwell's check had cleared, and I'd spent an hour on the telephone arranging interviews. It wasn't easy. Cyrus Bannister, the politician, was suspicious and wanted to know why a private detective was investigating Thatcher's death. Felix Armitage, the columnist, was hostile and said he'd already talked to the police. Lucinda Ashford, the poet, was teaching until Friday and couldn't come sooner. Dorothea Llewellyn was out of town until the weekend. Only Martin Gale, the legal scholar, agreed readily, and something about his immediate cooperation made me uneasy. I gave Wolfe the schedule over breakfast. Thursday was always trout in brown butter with capers, toast points, and fresh figs. Wolfe was on his second helping when I laid out the appointments. Gale at 11 this morning, Bannister at 3, Armitage tomorrow at 10, Ashford and Llewellyn both on Saturday. Wolfe frowned. Saturday is unacceptable. Saturday is for reading and reflection, not interrogating suspects. Saturday is the only day they're both available, unless you want to wait until next week. I don't want to wait at all. I want to refuse this case. I set down my coffee. Since when? Since I spent the night thinking about it. Archie, we have no physical evidence, no reliable witnesses, and no confirmation that a crime has even occurred. Thatcher's death may well have been suicide. The note Hartwell received may be a hoax or a misguided attempt at intimidation by someone unconnected to the circle. We're being asked to investigate shadows. Shadows that paid us $10,000. Money is not sufficient justification for pursuing an impossible case. Then why did you take it? Wolfe was silent for a moment, which is unusual. Finally, because Hartwell was afraid. Genuinely, deeply afraid, and fear of that magnitude is rarely baseless. So you do think there's a blackmailer? I think there's something. Whether it's blackmail, whether it's connected to Thatcher's death, whether it will lead anywhere productive, all of that is unknown. I dislike unknowns. Then let's make them known, starting with Gale at 11. Wolfe pushed away his plate and stood. It was 9:40, which meant he had 20 minutes before his sacred orchid time, 2 hours every morning, 9 to 11 in the plant rooms on the roof with Theodore Horstman. Nothing short of nuclear war interrupts that schedule, and even then Wolfe would probably want to finish inspecting the Cattleyas before acknowledging the crisis. "Very well," he said. "But Archie, watch these people carefully. Blackmailers are skilled liars. They have to be. Their entire existence depends on deception, manipulation, and knowing precisely which words to use and when. If one of the Augustan Circle is our blackmailer, they will be extraordinarily convincing." He left for the plant rooms, and I spent the next hour checking our files on the members of the Augustan Circle. I'd asked Lon Cohen at the Gazette to run background checks, and he delivered last night 3 pages on each person, compiled from public records, news archives, and the kind of gossip that doesn't make it into print but everyone knows anyway. Randolph Hartwell, 58 years old, attorney specializing in corporate law, partner at Hartwell and Associates, married twice, divorced twice, no children. Reputation for aggressive litigation, and a talent for turning bad contracts into favorable settlements. Income in the 6 figures annually. Lives in a Fifth Avenue apartment. Collects rare books. Lucinda Ashford, 43. Professor of English Literature at Columbia University. Published 3 collections of poetry. Won the Shelley Prize in 1952. Unmarried. Lives alone in Greenwich Village. Known for passionate lectures and a sharp tongue. Students either love her or fear her. Cyrus Bannister, 61, city councilman, representing the 8th District in Manhattan, Harlem, Washington Heights. Elected 1943, re-elected 4 times. Reputation as a reformer who fights corruption and advocates for housing improvements. Married, 3 children, 5 grandchildren. Lives in a brownstone on West 125th Street. Belongs to half a dozen civic organizations. Felix Armitage, 47, syndicated columnist for the Herald Tribune, writes about politics, corruption, organized crime, known for aggressive investigative journalism and a tendency to make enemies. Divorced, 1 daughter, lives in a walk-up on the Upper West Side, drinks too much and smokes too much, according to Lon's notes. Dorothea Llewellyn, 55, widow of industrialist Harrison Llewellyn, who died 5 years ago. Active in arts funding, opera patronage, and museum boards. Lives in a Park Avenue penthouse. Reputation for elegance and discretion. No children. Socializes with the upper crust of New York society, but maintains a certain distance. Admired but not necessarily liked. Martin Gale, 39. Attorney specializing in criminal defense. Teaches part-time at NYU Law School. Brilliant but somewhat isolated. Known for taking difficult cases and winning them through meticulous preparation and legal acrobatics. Unmarried, lives in Chelsea, publishes academic articles on constitutional law. 6 people, 6 very different lives. And one of them, if Hartwell was right, was a blackmailer willing to kill. At 10:55, I heard Wolfe's elevator descending from the roof. He came into the office, settled behind his desk, and rang for beer. Fritz brought it, along with a small plate of cheese crackers that Wolfe never eats but Fritz always provides anyway. "Gale should be here in 5 minutes," I said. "You want me to handle the preliminaries?" "No, I'll begin. But watch him, Archie. Legal minds are trained to deflect, equivocate, and obscure. If Gale is hiding something, he'll do it cleverly." At precisely 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Martin Gale was tall, thin, and angular. The kind of man who looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts and hadn't quite fit together properly. He wore wire-rimmed glasses that made his eyes look larger than they were, a grey suit that had seen better days, and carried a worn leather briefcase that looked like it had survived law school, several trials, and possibly a flood. When Fritz opened the door, Gale stepped inside and immediately noticed Caesar, who was lying near the office entrance. "Guard dog?" Gale asked. "1 of 6, I said. "The others are around. Don't worry. They're disciplined." I wasn't worried. I like dogs. They're more honest than people. I led him to the office. Wolfe looked up from his beer and studied Gale for a long moment before speaking. "Sit down, Mr. Gale." Gale sat, placed his briefcase beside the chair, and folded his hands in his lap. "Mr. Hartwell told me you're investigating Gilbert Thatcher's death. I'm happy to help, though I'm not sure what I can tell you. Start with this. Do you believe Thatcher killed himself?" Gale didn't hesitate. "No." "Why not?" "Because Gilbert was constitutionally incapable of suicide. I don't mean that in a moral sense. I mean it psychologically. He was a man of profound faith and unshakable routine. Suicide would have required him to violate both. He wouldn't have done it. Wolfe leaned back. Faith and routine can collapse under sufficient pressure. They can, but Gilbert showed no signs of collapse. I saw him 2 weeks ago at our monthly circle meeting. He was engaged, articulate, even cheerful. If he was contemplating suicide, he hid it perfectly. Or perhaps he was simply skilled at deception. Gale smiled thinly. Mr. Wolfe, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I spend my professional life evaluating deception. Gilbert wasn't deceptive. He was transparent to the point of naivety. Then who killed him? I don't know, but I know why. That got Wolfe's attention. Explain. Gale reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He placed it on Wolfe's desk, and I moved to look over Wolfe's shoulder. It was a typed note, similar to the one Hartwell had shown us. Your secret is known. $10,000 will keep it private. Instructions to follow. When did you receive this? Wolfe asked. 2 months ago. It was mailed to my office. Plain envelope, Midtown postmark, no return address. What secret? Gale's face tightened. 6 years ago, I represented a client in a murder trial. The defendant was guilty. Objectively, indisputably guilty. The prosecution's case was strong, but they'd obtained key evidence through an illegal search. I should have fought the case on Fourth Amendment grounds and forced the evidence to be excluded. Instead, I did something worse. What? I manufactured an alibi witness. I found someone willing to testify, falsely, that my client was elsewhere when the murder occurred. The witness was convincing. The jury acquitted. My client walked free. And the witness? I paid him $5,000 and sent him to California. He's never come back. Wolfe studied Gale with an expression I couldn't quite read. Why are you telling me this? Because 2 months ago, someone sent me that note. They knew about the witness, knew about the payment, knew details that should have been buried forever. Whoever sent it has access to records I thought I'd destroyed. They demanded $10,000 to be left in a locker at Penn Station. I paid. And then nothing. Until Gilbert came to me 3 weeks ago. He said he'd been hearing rumors, members of the circle receiving anonymous letters, being asked for money, living in fear. He said he was going to find out who was behind it. He asked if I'd received anything suspicious. I didn't tell him the truth. I said no. I was ashamed. And a week later, Thatcher was dead. Yes. Wolfe picked up his beer glass, drank, set it down. Mr. Gale, you're a lawyer. You understand that what you've just told me constitutes confession to multiple crimes, subornation of perjury, obstruction of justice, possibly conspiracy. I do. Why confess now? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Because Gilbert is dead, and I believe the blackmailer killed him, and because I want you to find them before anyone else dies. Gale leaned forward, his eyes intense behind the glasses. Mr. Wolfe, I deserve to be prosecuted. I know that. When this is over, I'll turn myself in. But right now, catching a murderer matters more than my guilt. After Gale left, I looked at Wolfe. Think he's telling the truth? Yes. Why? Because lying would have been easier. He could have denied everything, played the victim, demanded protection. Instead, he confessed to crimes that will destroy his career and possibly send him to prison. That requires either extraordinary stupidity or extraordinary conscience. Gale doesn't strike me as stupid. So he's a victim, not the blackmailer. So it appears, which means we can eliminate him as a suspect. Wolfe reached for his pen and crossed Gale's name off the list. 5 remain, and one of them is very dangerous. At 3 o'clock, Cyrus Bannister arrived. He came with the confidence of a man who's used to having doors opened for him, and cameras pointed at him. 61 years old, silver-haired, wearing a navy suit that probably cost $500, and a smile that had won 4 elections. When Fritz opened the door, Bannister shook his hand, complimented the brownstone's architecture, and patted Mars, our second-largest Doberman, on the head like they were old friends. Mars tolerated it, barely. In the office, Bannister took the red leather chair and settled in like he was about to give a speech. Mr. Wolfe, thank you for seeing me. Randolph explained that you're looking into Gilbert's death. Terrible business. Gilbert was a good man, a moral man. We'll all miss him. Did you like him? Wolfe asked. Bannister blinked. Of course I liked him. I didn't ask if you respected him. I asked if you liked him. Yes, I liked him. Why? Because he was genuine. In my profession, Mr. Wolfe, genuine people are rare. Everyone has an angle, an agenda, a pole they're trying to improve. Gilbert had none of that. He spoke his mind, argued his positions, and didn't care if you disagreed. It was refreshing. Wolfe studied him. You're a politician. You've been in office for 12 years. That requires compromise, deception, and flexibility of principle. Did Thatcher approve of your methods? Bannister's smile faded slightly. Gilbert and I disagreed on many things, but we respected each other. Did he confront you about anything recently? Any accusation? Any concern? No. Are you certain? Quite certain. Mr. Bannister, are you being blackmailed? The room went silent. Bannister's face remained carefully neutral, but his hands tightened on the arms of the chair. That's an extraordinary question. It's a relevant question. Based on what? Based on the fact that Gilbert Thatcher told multiple people, including Randolph Hartwell and Martin Gale, that someone in the Augustan Circle was blackmailing its members. Based on the fact that Thatcher is now dead, and based on the fact that you just lied to me. I didn't. You did. When I asked if Thatcher confronted you, your eyes moved to the left, and your breathing changed. Classic indicators of deception. You're a politician, Mr. Bannister. You should be better at lying. Bannister stood. I don't have to tolerate this. No, you don't. You can leave. But know this. If you're hiding something relevant to Thatcher's death, I will discover it. And when I do, I'll ensure the police know everything, including your lies. Bannister stared at Wolfe for a long moment. Then slowly, he sat back down. All right, he said quietly. Yes, I'm being blackmailed. For what? Bannister's face showed every one of his 61 years. 20 years ago, I accepted a bribe from a real estate developer. $5,000 to vote in favor of a zoning variance that allowed him to build in a residential neighborhood. I needed the money. I was drowning in campaign debt, and I convinced myself it wasn't really corruption because the variance would have passed anyway. What happened? The building was constructed. The developer made millions, and I've regretted it ever since. I used that $5,000 to pay my debts, and I've spent the next 20 years trying to make amends by fighting corruption instead of participating in it. Who knows about the bribe? No one, or so I thought, but 2 months ago, I received a letter. It detailed the bribe with enough accuracy that I knew someone had documentation, probably bank records or correspondence I thought were lost. The letter demanded $8,000. I paid. How? Cash, left in a trash can in Central Park. Anonymous instructions, no contact. And then? Nothing. Until Gilbert came to me 3 weeks ago. He said he knew several Circle members were being blackmailed. He said he was close to identifying the blackmailer. He asked if I was involved. I denied it. I couldn't admit it, not even to Gilbert. And then he died. Yes. Wolfe sat back. Mr. Bannister, if this becomes public, your career will end. I know. But you're telling me anyway. Because Gilbert is dead, and I don't want anyone else to die, because I'm 61 years old, and I'm tired of living in fear, and because despite what I did 20 years ago, I still believe in justice. Bannister's voice was steady. Do what you need to do, Mr. Wolfe. I'll accept the consequences. After Bannister left, I said, 2 victims, 2 confessions. This is getting interesting. It's getting predictable, Wolfe said. The blackmailer chose victims carefully. People with secrets, people with reputations to protect, people who would pay rather than fight. Gale and Bannister are both guilty of serious crimes, both terrified of exposure, and both willing to pay. That's the profile of an ideal victim. So the blackmailer is smart. The blackmailer is meticulous, which makes them dangerous. Friday morning brought Felix Armitage, the newspaper columnist. He arrived at 10 o'clock, looking like a man who'd been up all night. Rumpled suit, bloodshot eyes, and the smell of cigarettes clinging to him like a personal fog. He took the red leather chair without waiting to be invited, and pulled out a pack of Lucky Strikes. You mind if I smoke? He asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Armitage put the cigarettes away. Fair enough. It's your house. It is. And you're here because I want to know if you killed Gilbert Thatcher." Armitage laughed, a short barking sound. "Direct. I like that. No, I didn't kill Gilbert, but I'm pretty sure I know who did." That got Wolfe's attention. "Explain." "I'm a journalist, Mr. Wolfe. I investigate. I ask questions. I dig until I find answers. 2 weeks ago, I started digging into Gilbert's death because something about it didn't sit right. Methodist minister, teetotaler, suddenly drinking himself to death with whiskey? Didn't make sense. What did you find?" "I found that Gilbert had been making inquiries. Quiet inquiries. Careful ones, but inquiries nonetheless. He talked to 3 different members of the circle in the week before he died, including me. He asked each of us if we'd received any unusual correspondence, any threats, any demands for money." "What did you tell him?" Armitage hesitated. "I told him no, but that was a lie." "Yes. You're being blackmailed." It wasn't a question. Armitage sighed and reached for his cigarettes again, then remembered and put them back. 4 months ago, I received a letter. It detailed an affair I'd had with a source, a woman who was feeding me information about mob connections in the garment district. The affair was consensual, but it violated every journalistic ethics rule in the book. If it came out, I'd lose my column, my reputation, probably my career. What did the letter demand? $7,000. I paid. How? Cash, left at a phone booth in Queens. Standard blackmail procedure. Untraceable. No contact. And after you paid? Nothing. Until Gilbert started asking questions. Then I got nervous. If Gilbert found out I was being blackmailed, he'd want to know why. And I couldn't tell him. Wolfe leaned forward. "Mr. Armitage, you're a professional investigator. You must have formed some hypothesis about who is blackmailing you." "I have." "Who?" "Randolph Hartwell." I sat up straighter. "The man who hired us." "The same. Think about it. Hartwell organized the circle. He hosts the meetings. He controls who's invited. And when we gather, he's in everyone's confidence, knows everyone's business. If anyone has access to our secrets, it's him." Wolfe picked up his pen. "What evidence do you have?" "None. Just logic and instinct. But I've spent 20 years reporting on criminals, and I know the pattern. Blackmail requires access, information, and leverage. Hartwell has all 3. Have you shared this theory with anyone?" "Only you." "Then keep it that way. If you're right, confronting Hartwell would be dangerous. If you're wrong, you'll destroy an innocent man's reputation." After Armitage left, I looked at Wolfe. "Think he's right about Hartwell?" "Possibly. Hartwell does have unusual access to the circle's members. But access alone doesn't prove guilt. Everyone in that circle has some degree of access to the others. Shared meetings, private conversations, social gatherings, any of them could gather information if they were careful and patient enough. So Hartwell's still on the list. Everyone's still on the list, except Gail. Saturday arrived cold and grey. I'd scheduled Lucinda Ashford for 11 and Dorothea Llewellyn for 2, which meant a morning of anticipation and an afternoon of more interrogation. Wolfe was in a foul mood. Saturday is his reading day, and he resented giving it up for interviews. But $20,000 outweighs personal preference, so at 11 o'clock we were in the office waiting when the doorbell rang. Lucinda Ashford was 43 and looked like someone who lived inside her own head most of the time. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, and her dark hair was pulled back in a bun that suggested she'd stopped thinking about appearance sometime around age 30 and never resumed. She had sharp eyes that took in everything, and when Caesar followed us into the office, she stopped and studied him. "Doberman," she said. "Impressive. What's his name?" "Caesar," I said. "Appropriate. He has the bearing of a conqueror." In the office, she sat down and folded her hands. "Mr. Wolfe, I understand you're investigating Gilbert's death. I'll tell you what I can, but I doubt it will help. I didn't know Gilbert well outside the circle." "Did you like him?" "I respected him. He was honest, which is rare, but we disagreed on almost everything. Religion, philosophy, politics. Our conversations were stimulating precisely because we couldn't agree." "Did he confront you recently about anything?" "Yes." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About blackmail. 3 weeks ago, Gilbert came to my apartment. He said he believed someone in the circle was gathering information and using it to extort money. He asked if I'd received any threats or demands. I told him no. But you were lying. Ashford's eyes hardened. How did you know? Because everyone else has lied about the same thing. You're being blackmailed, Miss Ashford. What for? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, an affair. 2 years ago, with a colleague. He was married. It was brief, it ended badly, and I've regretted it since. If it became public, it would destroy his marriage and damage my professional reputation. When did you receive the blackmail demand? 3 months ago. A typed letter, mailed to my office at Columbia. It demanded $5,000. Did you pay? Yes. Cash, left in a locker at Grand Central. And after you paid? Nothing. Until Gilbert came asking questions. Then I received a second letter, unsigned, typed, telling me to stop talking to Gilbert, or the affair would be made public anyway. Wolfe leaned back. Did you show Gilbert this second letter? No. I was too frightened. A week later, Gilbert was dead. Do you have the letter? Ashford reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet. She placed it on Wolfe's desk, and I moved to look. It was brief. Stop talking. Stop asking questions, or everyone will know. The same typing, the same anonymous style, the blackmailer's signature, such as it was. Miss Ashford, Wolfe said slowly, you're a poet. You understand language, rhythm, word choice. Have you noticed anything distinctive about these letters? Any pattern, any peculiarity? Ashford thought for a moment. The syntax is formal, educated. Whoever wrote these knows grammar and structure. There are no colloquialisms, no contractions. It's the language of someone accustomed to writing professionally. Which describes everyone in the Augustan Circle. Yes, which is why I can't identify the author. After she left, I said, 4 victims, 4 confessions. Whoever this blackmailer is, they're thorough. They're systematic, Wolfe corrected. They chose victims with serious secrets, demanded reasonable amounts, not enough to bankrupt, but enough to hurt, and provided clear, untraceable payment methods. This isn't amateur work. So we're dealing with a professional. We're dealing with someone who understands human nature and exploits it ruthlessly. That's worse than a professional. At 2 o'clock, Dorothea Llewellyn arrived. She swept into the brownstone like visiting royalty. Expensive grey suit, pearls, fur stole, heels that clicked on the floor with precision. She was 55 but looked 40, thanks to what must have been a small fortune spent on maintenance. When Fritz opened the door, she smiled at him like he was a valued servant and proceeded to the office without waiting to be guided. Minerva, our most strategic Doberman, was lying near Wolfe's desk. She lifted her head to study Llewellyn, assessed her as non-threatening, and settled back down. Even the dogs, apparently, recognized social hierarchy. Llewellyn sat in the red leather chair and arranged her fur stole with the care of someone posing for a portrait. Mr. Wolfe, Randolph explained that you're investigating Gilbert's unfortunate death. I'm happy to assist, though I'm not sure what I can tell you. Start with the truth, Wolfe said. Are you being blackmailed? Llewellyn's composure didn't crack. No. You're lying. I assure you I'm not. Mrs. Llewellyn, I've now interviewed 5 members of the Augustan Circle. 4 of them admitted to being blackmailed. The odds of you being the only exception are vanishingly small. Then perhaps I'm the vanishing exception. Wolfe studied her for a long moment. Very well. Let's try a different approach. You're a widow. Your husband died 5 years ago and left you his estate. How much was it worth? That's impertinent. It's relevant. I don't see how. Mrs. Llewellyn, I've had your finances investigated. I know your husband left you nothing but debts. I know you've been living on credit and borrowed money for 5 years. I know you're on the verge of bankruptcy, and I know someone found out. Llewellyn's face went white. For several seconds, she didn't speak. Then, very quietly, who told you? It doesn't matter. What matters is that someone else knows. Someone who sent you a letter demanding money to keep your financial situation private. Someone who threatened to destroy your social standing if you didn't pay. How much did they ask for? I don't know. You tell me. Llewellyn closed her eyes. $6,000. Did you pay? I had to. If it became known that I'm bankrupt, I'd lose everything. my position on museum boards, my invitations, my entire social world. Everything I've built would collapse. How did you raise the money? I borrowed it from a man who doesn't ask questions and charges interest that would horrify you. A loan shark. A private lender. Same thing. And now you're paying interest on blackmail, which means you're trapped. Wolfe leaned forward. Mrs. Llewellyn, who in the circle knows about your finances? No one. I've been extremely careful. Yet someone found out. Someone who had access to financial records you thought were private. Someone who knew where to look and what to look for. Who could that be? I don't know. Think. Who in the circle has asked about your finances? Who's shown unusual interest in your situation? Llewellyn was silent for a long time. Then Randolph Hartwell. 6 months ago, we were at a meeting, and he asked how I was managing since Harrison's death. I said I was fine. He pressed, said he was concerned, said if I ever needed financial advice, he had contacts who could help. I thought he was being kind, but now you wonder if he was fishing for information. Yes. After she left, I looked at Wolfe. 3 people have now pointed to Hartwell, Armitage, Llewellyn, and by implication Ashford. That's a pattern. It's a pattern, Wolfe agreed. But is it real, or is Hartwell being framed? If he's the blackmailer, why hire me? Why draw attention to himself? To control the investigation, to make sure you don't look too closely at him. Possible, but risky. A competent investigator would see through that strategy. So you don't think it's Hartwell? I don't know what I think. Not yet. Wolfe reached for his beer. But I know we're missing something. Some piece that ties this together. And until we find it, we're guessing. Sunday morning I woke to the phone ringing. It was 8 o'clock, too early for social calls, too late for emergencies that happened overnight. I stumbled downstairs in my robe and picked up the receiver in the office. Nero Wolfe's residence. Archie Goodwin speaking. Mr. Goodwin, this is Inspector Kramer. I woke up completely. Kramer doesn't call on Sunday mornings unless something's gone very wrong. What happened? Felix Armitage is dead. The words hit like cold water. When? Sometime last night. Neighbor heard a gunshot around 11:30, but didn't call it in until morning. By the time we got there, Armitage had been dead for hours. Single gunshot to the chest, close range. No weapon at the scene, no signs of forced entry. Someone he knew, someone he let in. I sat down at my desk. Any suspects? Not yet, but I understand Armitage came to see you Friday morning. Want to tell me what that was about? He came to talk about Gilbert Thatcher's death. He thought it was murder. And now he's dead too. Funny how that works. Kramer's voice was hard. I'm coming over. Don't leave the house. He hung up. I went upstairs and knocked on Wolfe's bedroom door. Kramer's coming. Felix Armitage is dead, shot last night in his apartment. There was a long silence. Then Wolfe's voice muffled by the door. Satisfactory. Satisfactory. The blackmailer is eliminating threats. First Thatcher, now Armitage. He's cleaning up, which means we're getting close. Close to what? We don't even know who he is. Not yet, but we will. Get dressed, Archie. When Kramer arrives, tell him everything. Hold nothing back. Inspector Kramer walked into the brownstone at 9:30, looking like a man who'd been up all night and was running on coffee and stubbornness. He's a big man, square-shouldered, with a face that seemed too much and forgotten none of it. He knows the brownstone well. He's been here dozens of times over the years, and when Fritz let him in, the dogs barely stirred. Caesar, lying in the hall, lifted his head, recognized Kramer, and went back to sleep. Even Loyal, usually watchful, just twitched an ear. The dogs knew Kramer was one of the good guys, even if he and Wolfe didn't always agree on methods. Kramer dropped into the red leather chair and glared at Wolfe. All right, start talking. Wolfe told him everything. Hartwell's visit, the blackmail, the interviews with Gale, Bannister, Armitage, Ashford and Llewellyn. He explained the pattern, victims with secrets, anonymous letters, untraceable payments. He explained Thatcher's investigation and his subsequent death, and he explained that 3 people, Armitage, Ashford and Llewellyn, had pointed to Randolph Hartwell as the likely blackmailer. When he finished, Kramer said, "So you've got 5 people being blackmailed, 2 of them dead, and a 6th person who hired you to investigate. And you think the sixth person might be the killer? It's one possibility. What's another? That Hartwell is innocent and is being framed by the real blackmailer. That someone in the circle is deflecting suspicion by pointing toward Hartwell. Who? I don't know yet. Kramer stood. Then figure it out. Fast. Because if this bastard kills anyone else, I'm holding you responsible. After he left, I said, 2 murders in 3 weeks. This is getting out of hand. It's getting desperate, Wolfe corrected. The blackmailer is losing control. Thatcher confronted him, so Thatcher died. Armitage was asking questions, so Armitage died. Whoever this is, they're willing to kill to protect themselves, which means everyone in the circle is now a potential victim or a potential suspect, including Hartwell. Especially Hartwell. If he's the blackmailer, he's killed twice and will kill again. If he's innocent, he's in danger precisely because everyone suspects him. Wolfe reached for his beer. We need more information. Call Saul Panzer. I want deep background on everyone in the circle. Financial records, personal histories, associations, everything. That'll take time. We don't have time. Armitage is dead. The blackmailer is escalating. We have perhaps 48 hours before someone else dies. I spent Sunday afternoon on the phone with Saul Panzer. Saul is the best freelance operative in New York, maybe in the country. He's short, slight, unremarkable, and can blend into any crowd without being noticed. He's also relentlessly thorough, which is why Wolfe uses him for background work. I need everything you can find on 6 people, I told him. Financial records, criminal histories, associations, habits, and I need it by tomorrow morning. Everything costs extra on Sunday, Saul said. Bill us. This is urgent. How urgent? 2 people are dead urgent. I'll have something by midnight. I hung up and went to find Wolfe. He was in the plant rooms on the roof. Sunday afternoon is part of his orchid schedule, examining a particularly stubborn phalaenopsis that apparently wasn't blooming to his satisfaction. Theodore Horstman, our orchid nurse, was hovering nearby with the expression of a man who's been told his best efforts aren't good enough and isn't sure what to do about it. Saul's on it, I said. He'll have background by midnight. Wolfe didn't look up from the orchid. Good. In the meantime, call Hartwell. Tell him I want to meet with the entire circle tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, here. He won't like that. I don't care if he likes it. Tell him it's mandatory. Anyone who refuses will be considered a suspect and reported to the police. That'll panic them. Good. Panicked people make mistakes, and we need mistakes. I called Hartwell at 6. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding tired. Goodwin. Mr. Wolfe wants the entire Augustan Circle here tomorrow night at 7. Everyone. No exceptions. Why? Because Felix Armitage is dead, and Mr. Wolfe thinks the killer is one of you. He wants everyone in one room where he can observe, question, and hopefully identify who's lying. There was a long silence. Then, you think it's me, don't you? I think you're a possibility. So does everyone else in the circle. I didn't kill anyone. Then prove it. Come tomorrow night. Bring everyone else. If you're innocent, this is your chance to clear yourself. And if I don't come, then Mr. Wolfe will tell Inspector Kramer everything, including the fact that 3 people have identified you as the probable blackmailer. How long do you think it'll take before you're arrested? Another silence. Then quietly, I'll be there, and I'll make sure the others come too. Saul called at 11:30 that night. I was in the office, working through notes and trying to see a pattern that kept eluding me. When the phone rang, I grabbed it. Saul, I've got your information. Some of it's interesting. How interesting? Randolph Hartwell is broke. His law practice is failing. He's behind on rent for his office, and he owes $40,000 to various creditors. He's been covering it by taking advances from clients and settling cases quickly, sometimes too quickly, to generate cash flow. I sat up. So he has motive for blackmail. He has motive for a lot of things, but here's the interesting part. 3 months ago, Hartwell deposited $15,000 into his personal account. Cash. No source documentation. Blackmail payments. Could be, but there's more. Lucinda Ashford's finances show a withdrawal of $5,000 in cash 3 months ago, same week as Hartwell's deposit. Cyrus Bannister withdrew $8,000 around the same time. Martin Gale withdrew $10,000. All cash, all untraceable, and all of it adds up to more than Hartwell deposited. I frowned. So either Hartwell's not the only blackmailer, or he's depositing the money elsewhere. Or someone else is collecting the payments, and Hartwell's just the front man. But there's something else. Dorothea Llewellyn's finances are a disaster. Wolfe was right about that. But 6 months ago, she borrowed $6,000 from a loan shark named Vincent Callow. Callow works for the Moretti family. He's connected, dangerous, and not someone you want owing money to. So Llewellyn is desperate. Beyond desperate. If she doesn't pay Callow back soon, she'll be more than bankrupt. She'll be in real danger. Desperate enough to commit blackmail herself? Desperate enough for anything. I thanked Saul and hung up. Then I went upstairs and knocked on Wolfe's door. When he grumbled permission, I entered and gave him the information. He listened in silence, then said, "So we have 3 suspects with motive. Hartwell needs money and has suspicious deposits. Llewellyn needs money and has dangerous debts. And someone else, someone we haven't identified, is collecting blackmail payments. This is getting complicated. What do? We do what we planned. Tomorrow night we gather everyone in one room. We observe, we question, and we wait for someone to make a mistake. And if no one does, someone will. They always do." Monday evening arrived cold and clear. By 6:30, Fritz had transformed the office into something resembling a courtroom. Extra chairs arranged in a semicircle facing Wolfe's desk. Fresh beer on the side table. Everything precise and ready. The 6 dogs were distributed throughout the house. Caesar in the office near Wolfe's desk. Mars at the front door. Apollo upstairs watching from the landing. Minerva and Diana in the kitchen with Fritz. And Loyal on the front stoop, watching the street with those intelligent eyes that never missed movement. At 6:45, Inspector Kramer's plainclothes detective, a man named Rowcliffe, took up position across the street, trying and failing to look inconspicuous. Wolfe had insisted on police presence, and Kramer had grudgingly agreed. If the blackmailer tried anything violent, Rowcliffe would intervene. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Randolph Hartwell arrived first, looking pale and nervous. He'd lost weight since I'd first seen him. His expensive overcoat hung looser, and there were circles under his eyes that suggested sleep had become a stranger. Caesar lifted his head when Hartwell entered the office, studied him for a moment, then settled back down. No threat, apparently. Or perhaps Caesar was reserving judgment. Cyrus Bannister arrived 10 minutes later, all politician smiles and firm handshakes, though I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Martin Gale showed up at 7:15, carrying his battered briefcase, and looking like a man walking to his own trial. Lucinda Ashford arrived at 7:20, quiet and watchful, and at 7:30, Dorothea Llewellyn swept in, elegant as ever but with a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. They settled into the chairs, and Wolfe surveyed them from behind his desk like a judge about to deliver sentencing. "Thank you for coming," Wolfe said. "You're here because 2 members of your circle are dead, and I believe one of you is responsible." The room exploded. Bannister stood. Hartwell protested. Ashford went pale. Only Llewellyn and Gale remained still, watching. Wolfe raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Bannister. I'm not finished." "This is outrageous," Bannister said. "You can't accuse us of murder without evidence." "I have evidence. I have motive, means, and opportunity. And I have the testimony of each of you, given freely in this office over the past 4 days. Now sit down." Bannister sat, his face red. Wolfe continued. "Gilbert Thatcher discovered that someone in this circle was blackmailing its members. He began investigating, asking questions, gathering information. The blackmailer learned of this and killed him, staging the death to look like suicide. Felix Armitage continued Thatcher's investigation. The blackmailer killed him too, more directly this time, with a gunshot. 2 murders, both committed to protect the blackmailer's identity and operation." "How do you know it's one of us?" Gale asked quietly. "Because the blackmailer had to have intimate knowledge of each victim's secrets. That requires access, trust and time. It requires someone who could observe you without suspicion, gather information without being noticed, and exploit vulnerabilities without resistance. Someone in this room." Wolfe turned to Hartwell. "Mr. Hartwell, you organize the circle. You control the meetings. You have access to everyone's lives. 3 people in this room have identified you as the probable blackmailer." Hartwell's face went white. That's a lie. Is it? Mr. Armitage told me directly that he suspected you. Mrs. Llewellyn said you asked unusual questions about her finances. Miss Ashford implied that you showed excessive interest in members' personal affairs. Are they all lying? Yes. Or they're mistaken. I didn't blackmail anyone. Then explain this. I stood and placed a document on Wolfe's desk, Saul's financial report. 3 months ago, you deposited $15,000 in cash into your personal bank account. Where did that money come from? Hartwell stood. That's none of your business. It's very much my business. You hired me to investigate blackmail. Now I'm investigating you. Answer the question. It was a settlement. A client case. Which client? I can't disclose that. Attorney-client privilege. Convenient. Mrs. Llewellyn, you borrowed $6,000 from Vincent Carlo 3 months ago. Why? Llewellyn's composure cracked. How do you know that? I make it my business to know. You borrowed from a loan shark connected to the Moretti family. That suggests desperation, and desperate people do desperate things. I didn't kill anyone. Then who did? Wolfe's voice cut through the room like a blade. Someone here is a blackmailer and a murderer, someone who's been gathering secrets, extorting money, and killing to protect their operation, someone who's sitting in this room right now. The silence was thick enough to cut. Then Martin Gale spoke. Mr. Wolfe, I have a question. You said the blackmailer required intimate knowledge of our secrets. But how did they gather that knowledge? How did they know about my falsified witness, Bannister's bribe, Ashford's affair, Llewellyn's debts? Those aren't things we discussed at circle meetings. An excellent question, Mr. Gale. And the answer is simple. The blackmailer didn't gather information at meetings. They gathered it elsewhere, through research, surveillance, and careful attention to casual conversations. They listened when you talked about your cases. They noticed when you were worried about money. They observed when you seemed distracted or anxious. And then they investigated further, until they found your secrets. That still doesn't tell us who it is. No, but it tells us what they are. Patient, intelligent, observant, and ruthless enough to kill twice to protect themselves. Wolfe leaned forward. There's one more thing the blackmailer required: access to typewriters. The blackmail letters were all typed on a manual typewriter, likely an Underwood or Royal, based on the letter forms. Who among you uses a manual typewriter regularly? Ashford raised her hand slowly. I do, for my poetry. As do I, Hartwell said. In my office. Gale nodded. I have one at home. And I, Bannister added, for correspondence. Llewellyn smiled thinly. I don't type, Mr. Wolfe. I have secretaries for that. Wolfe sat back. So 4 of you have access to typewriters, and 1 doesn't. Interesting. Mrs. Llewellyn, if you don't type, how did you send blackmail letters? I didn't send any blackmail letters. Then you're innocent, or you used someone else's typewriter, or you had someone else type for you. Wolfe picked up his beer glass. The problem with blackmail is that it creates a web of deception. Everyone lies, everyone hides, everyone suspects everyone else, and in that web, truth becomes very difficult to find. So what do we do? Ashford asked. We wait, Wolfe said. We wait for someone to panic, someone to make a mistake, someone to reveal themselves. And while we wait, Kramer's voice came from the doorway. I'll be watching. Everyone turned. Kramer stood in the hall, having entered through the front door without anyone noticing. Rowcliffe was behind him. Inspector, Wolfe said, I didn't invite you. You didn't have to. This is a murder investigation, and you just accused 5 people of being potential killers. I'll take it from here. Kramer looked at the assembled circle. Everyone stays in New York. No one leaves town. If anyone tries, you'll be arrested for obstruction. He left, Rowcliffe following. The members of the circle began to depart. Bannister first, then Gale, then Ashford. Hartwell lingered near the door. Mr. Wolfe, I didn't kill anyone. I swear it. Then help me prove it. Who in the circle had access to your typewriter? Everyone. The meetings were at my apartment. My office is there. Anyone could have used it when I wasn't looking. Including you. Including me. But I didn't. After everyone had gone, I looked at Wolfe. So what now? We gathered them all together, stirred the pot, and got nothing. We got panic, Wolfe said. And panic leads to mistakes. Watch them, Archie. Call Saul. Have him surveil everyone in the circle. Someone will do something revealing in the next 24 hours. I guarantee it. Tuesday morning I called Saul and arranged surveillance. He'd watch Hartwell. Fred Durkin, another operative we use, would watch Bannister. Ori Cather would watch Llewellyn. I'd take Ashford and Gale. Well, Gale was a wild card. I'd check on him periodically. At 10 o'clock I followed Lucinda Ashford from her Greenwich Village apartment to Columbia University, where she taught a morning seminar on romantic poetry. I sat in the back of the lecture hall and listened to her dissect Shelley's Ozymandias with the intensity of a surgeon. She was brilliant, passionate, and completely absorbed in her work. If she was a blackmailer, she hid it well. After class, I followed her to a coffee shop on Broadway, where she met with a colleague, a middle-aged man in a tweed jacket, who spent 45 minutes discussing Byron. Nothing suspicious. At noon, Saul called. Hartwell just went to his bank, withdrew $5,000 in cash. He's running, or paying someone off. He's heading to Penn Station now. I left Ashford and drove to Penn Station, arriving just as Saul called again. He's at locker 217. He's putting something inside. I found Saul near the ticket counters. Where is he now? Gone. Left the station 5 minutes ago. What's in the locker? Didn't see, but I got the locker number. I went to locker 217. It was locked, of course, but Saul had thoughtfully acquired a key from a maintenance worker who owed him a favor. I opened it. Inside was a manila envelope. I took it, relocked the locker, and left. Back at the brownstone, I gave the envelope to Wolfe. He opened it carefully. Inside were $5,000 in cash and a typed note. This is the last payment. Leave me alone. Wolfe read it twice. Hartwell is paying someone off. Either he's the blackmailer trying to buy silence from an accomplice, or he's a victim making a final desperate payment. Which do you think? I think Hartwell is terrified, and terrified people do irrational things. At 3 o'clock, Ori called. Llewellyn just met with a man at a restaurant in Midtown. Big guy, expensive suit, looks like muscle. They argued for 20 minutes. She left crying. Vincent Callow? Probably. The loan shark. She's in deep. At 5 o'clock, Fred called. Bannister just had a visitor at his office. Man in his 30s, nervous, kept looking around. Stayed 10 minutes. When he left, Bannister looked like he'd been punched. Could you follow the visitor? Lost him in the subway. At 6 o'clock, Saul called again. Hartwell's back at the station. He's checking the locker. The envelope's gone. He looks relieved. Relieved. I told Wolfe everything. He listened, drank beer, thought. Someone collected Hartwell's payment, he said finally. Someone who knew about the locker, who knew Hartwell would leave money there. That's not random. That's planned. So Hartwell's being blackmailed too. Or he's paying off an accomplice. Or he's leaving money for someone else entirely. We need more information. At 7:30 the phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Mr. Goodwin, this is Martin Gale. I need to see Mr. Wolfe immediately. It's urgent. What happened? I can't explain over the phone. Please, it's life and death. I looked at Wolfe. He nodded. Come now, I said. Gale arrived 20 minutes later, breathless and wild-eyed. Caesar followed us into the office. Sensing tension, Gale dropped into the red leather chair and said, "She's going to kill me." Who? Wolfe asked. Dorothea Llewellyn. I just got a call from her. She said she knows I've been talking to you. She said if I don't give her $10,000 by tomorrow morning, she'll tell the police I killed Thatcher and Armitage. Did you? No, but she said she has evidence, something that will implicate me. She said she'll turn it over to Inspector Kramer unless I pay. Wolfe leaned forward. Mr. Gale, Mrs. Llewellyn is desperate. She owes money to dangerous people. She's capable of anything right now. So what do I do? You do nothing. I'll handle this. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, call Kramer. Tell him to arrest Dorothea Llewellyn for blackmail and suspicion of murder. I picked up the phone, but before I could dial, it rang. I answered. Nero Wolfe's office. Mr. Goodwin, this is Cyrus Bannister. I need help. Someone just tried to kill me. Bannister arrived at the brownstone 30 minutes later, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers and Inspector Kramer. He had a bandage on his left arm and looked like he'd been through a war. Kramer ushered him into the office while the uniforms waited in the hall. "Tell them what happened," Kramer said. Bannister sat down heavily. "I was leaving my office around 8 o'clock. I got to my car, and as I was unlocking it, someone shot at me from across the street. The bullet hit my arm. If I hadn't bent down to pick up my briefcase at that exact moment, it would have hit my chest." "Did you see the shooter?" Wolfe asked. "No. They were gone by the time I looked up. But I found this on my windshield." He handed Wolfe a folded piece of paper. Wolfe opened it and read aloud, "Stop talking, or the next one won't miss." The same typing, the same anonymous style, the blackmailer's signature. Kramer looked at Wolfe. "This is connected to your investigation." "Obviously." "Then I want everything. Names, motives, evidence. Now." Wolfe sighed. "Very well. Archie, call everyone in the circle. Tell them to be here in 1 hour. Tell them it's mandatory, and that anyone who refuses will be arrested." While I made the calls, Wolfe explained the situation to Kramer, the blackmail, the murders, the suspects. By the time I finished, everyone had agreed to come, even Llewellyn, who sounded terrified. At 9:30 they assembled in the office. Hartwell, Bannister, Gale, Ashford, and Llewellyn. Kramer stood near the door watching. The 6 dogs were positioned throughout the house, alert and ready. Wolfe surveyed them all. "One of you is a blackmailer and a double murderer. One of you killed Gilbert Thatcher and Felix Armitage. One of you shot Cyrus Bannister tonight, and I'm going to prove who it is." "How?" Hartwell asked. "By examining the evidence methodically. First, the victims. Thatcher and Armitage were both killed because they were investigating the blackmail. Thatcher confronted the killer, so he died. Armitage asked too many questions, so he died. Bannister survived tonight only by accident. The pattern is clear. The blackmailer eliminates threats." "We all knew that," Llewellyn said. "What we don't know is who the blackmailer is." "Don't we? Let's consider motive. Who in this room needs money desperately enough to commit blackmail?" Silence. "Mr. Hartwell, your law practice is failing. You owe $40,000 to creditors. 3 months ago, you deposited $15,000 in cash unexplained. Mrs. Llewellyn, you borrowed $6,000 from a loan shark and can't repay it. You're facing bankruptcy and worse. Both of you have financial motive." "I didn't kill anyone," Hartwell said. "Neither did I," Llewellyn added. "Perhaps. Let's consider means. The blackmail letters were typed on a manual typewriter. Who has access to typewriters? Mr. Hartwell, you do. Miss Ashford, you do. Mr. Gale, you do. Mr. Bannister, you do. Mrs. Llewellyn, you claim not to type, but you could have borrowed someone else's typewriter, so everyone has means." "This doesn't narrow anything down," Ashford said. "On the contrary, it narrows everything, because there's one piece of evidence we haven't discussed. The money. Blackmail produces cash. Lots of it. Where did that cash go?" Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, tell them about Hartwell's deposit." I stood. 3 months ago, Randolph Hartwell deposited $15,000 in cash, but the blackmail victims paid a total of at least $34,000. Gale paid $10,000, Bannister paid $8,000, Ashford paid $5,000, Llewellyn paid $6,000, Armitage paid $7,000. That's $36,000 total. So where's the other $21,000? "It doesn't exist," Hartwell said. "I didn't blackmail anyone. That $15,000 was a legitimate settlement from a client." "Then prove it. Name the client." "I can't. Attorney-client privilege." "Convenient." Wolfe turned to Llewellyn. "Mrs. Llewellyn, you owe Vincent Carlo $6,000. How were you planning to repay him?" "I don't know." "You don't know, or you were planning to use blackmail proceeds to cover the debt?" "I wasn't blackmailing anyone." "Then where were you tonight, between 7 and 8:30? Llewellyn went pale. "I was alone?" "Yes." "Can anyone verify that?" "No." "So you have no alibi for when Bannister was shot?" "Neither do you." Llewellyn's voice was rising. "Neither does anyone else in this room." "Actually," Gale said quietly, "I was with Mr. Goodwin. He called me just before 8, and we spoke for 20 minutes. I have an alibi." Wolfe nodded. "As does Mr. Hartwell. He was at Penn Station at 7:30, collecting money from a locker. Mr. Goodwin observed him. Miss Ashford was teaching an evening seminar. Her students can confirm. That leaves 3 people without alibis. Mr. Bannister, who was the victim, Mrs. Llewellyn, and one other person who hasn't spoken yet. Everyone turned to look. Wolfe pointed. Felix Armitage's murderer. Who? Kramer demanded. The person who had motive, means, opportunity, and access. The person who knew everyone's secrets because they organized the circle and controlled the meetings. The person who needed money desperately and found a way to get it. The person who killed twice and tried to kill a 3rd time tonight. Wolfe paused. Randolph Hartwell. The room exploded. Hartwell jumped to his feet. That's a lie. I didn't. Sit down, Mr. Hartwell, or I'll have Inspector Kramer arrest you immediately. Hartwell sat, his face white. Wolfe continued. You organized the Augustan Circle 8 years ago, ostensibly as a forum for intellectual discourse, but your real purpose was to gather information. You recruited members carefully, people with status, money, and secrets. You spent years cultivating their trust, learning their vulnerabilities, and documenting their mistakes. And then when your law practice began failing and your debts mounted, you used that information to extort them. You can't prove that. I can prove all of it. The $15,000 you deposited wasn't a settlement. It was blackmail proceeds. But you didn't deposit all of it. You kept the rest in cash, hidden, using it to pay your debts slowly to avoid suspicion. You typed the blackmail letters on your own typewriter, in your own apartment where anyone could have used it, giving yourself plausible deniability. And when Thatcher started investigating, you killed him. How? You invited him to your apartment under the pretext of discussing circle business. You drugged him, probably slipped something into coffee or tea, then forced whiskey and pills down his throat. You staged it to look like suicide. It was clever, but you made one mistake. What mistake? Thatcher didn't drink. Everyone knew it. You hoped the police wouldn't care, that they'd accept the suicide without question. But Thatcher's friends knew better, and when Armitage started asking questions, you panicked. You killed him too, shot him in his apartment, probably during a visit you claimed was about circle business. And tonight, when Bannister became too troublesome, you tried to kill him as well. Hartwell stood. You're insane. I didn't kill anyone. Then explain the money you left at Penn Station today. Who were you paying? It was blackmail, wasn't it? But not the blackmail you were committing. Blackmail you were paying, because someone found out what you'd done, and they're extorting you. Hartwell sank back into his chair, his face crumpled. Yes. The room went silent. Who? Kramer demanded. Hartwell looked up, and there were tears in his eyes. Dorothea Llewellyn. She figured it out 2 weeks ago. She came to me, said she knew I was blackmailing the circle. She said if I didn't pay her, she'd go to the police. I've been paying her $5,000 a week. That's where the money went. Everyone turned to Llewellyn. She smiled, a cold, calculating smile. Prove it. Wolfe nodded to me. Archie? I pulled out the envelope from the locker. This was left by Hartwell at Penn Station this afternoon. Mrs. Llewellyn collected it 2 hours later. Saul Panzer observed the entire transaction. Llewellyn's smile vanished. Kramer stepped forward. Dorothea Llewellyn, you're under arrest for blackmail and conspiracy to commit murder. Randolph Hartwell, you're under arrest for 2 counts of murder, attempted murder, and multiple counts of blackmail. Both of you have the right to remain silent. As Kramer read them their rights, I watched Hartwell's face. He looked relieved, like a man who'd been carrying an impossible weight and was finally allowed to set it down. After they'd been taken away, Gale said, "So Hartwell did kill Thatcher and Armitage?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "and Llewellyn discovered it and used the information to extort him. She needed money to pay her loan shark, and Hartwell was a perfect target. Desperate, guilty, and trapped." "And the shot at Bannister?" Hartwell again. "Bannister was asking too many questions, getting too close. Hartwell tried to silence him. Fortunately, he's a better lawyer than marksman." Bannister touched his bandaged arm. "Fortunately." Wednesday morning arrived with sunshine and the smell of Fritz's cooking. Wolfe was at his desk, working through the mail, looking satisfied in the way he gets when a case has been solved and the check has cleared. Hartwell's second 10,000 wouldn't arrive, of course. Hard to pay when you're in jail, but the first 10,000 was ours, and that was enough. Inspector Kramer called at 10. Hartwell confessed. Everything. He killed Thatcher by drugging him with sleeping pills dissolved in coffee, then poured whiskey down his throat and staged the scene. He killed Armitage by visiting him under the pretense of discussing the case, then shooting him when his back was turned. And he shot at Bannister from a rooftop across the street from his office. He's going away for life. And Llewellyn? She's being charged with extortion. She won't get murder charges, but she'll do time. And Vincent Cowker's disappointed that she won't be paying him back. A shame, Wolfe said, not sounding sympathetic. After Kramer hung up, I said, so Hartwell was the blackmailer all along. He created the circle specifically to gather information and exploit people. He did. It was methodical, patient, and ultimately doomed to failure. Blackmail always fails, Archie. It's built on fear, and fear eventually turns to anger. Thatcher got angry, Armitage got curious, Bannister got suspicious, and Llewellyn got greedy. Hartwell's entire operation collapsed because he underestimated human nature, and now the circle's destroyed. The circle was destroyed the moment Hartwell decided to exploit it. He turned discourse into deception, eloquence into extortion. He poisoned everything he touched. At 11, Wolfe went to the plant rooms. At noon, Fritz served lunch, veal scallopine, asparagus, and a salad that looked like art. At 2, Wolfe returned to his desk with beer and started reading a book about medieval rhetoric. Life at the brownstone returned to normal. That evening, I took Loyal for a walk. The brick-red pit bull padded beside me down West 35th Street, his notched ear twitching at every sound, his eyes scanning for threats that weren't there. We walked 4 blocks, turned around, and came back. When we reached the stoop, Loyal sat and looked up at me. 200 miles, I said. You walked 200 miles to get here, because your master believed Wolfe could find justice. And you know what? He was right. Loyal's tail wagged once. Inside, Wolfe was still reading. Caesar was lying near his desk. Fritz was humming in the kitchen. The bulletproof windows reflected the evening light, and somewhere upstairs the other dogs were patrolling, watching, guarding. The brownstone was a fortress, but more than that, it was home. A place where justice lived, where truth mattered, and where a dog who'd walked 200 miles to find help had finally found peace. And for now, that was everything.